There's this moment, a quiet, transformative moment, when someone who once held a significant place in your life sees you again. But this time something's different. You're not broken, you're not bitter, you're glowing. You're whole, you're peaceful. And in that instant, something profound shifts in their perception. You've moved on, and not just on the outside with a performative display of happiness. They see it in your eyes, they feel it in your energy, and let me tell you, it does something to them on a fundamental level. Now I want to talk about what really happens in a man's mind when he realizes you're no longer waiting in the wings, no longer carrying the hurt, and absolutely no longer available to be re-injured. This isn't about revenge, my friends. This is about transformation. When a man sees that you've genuinely moved on peacefully, without drama, without announcements, without the need to prove anything, he's not just seeing someone who's healed. He's confronted with the stark contrast between the life he imagined you'd live without him and the one you're actually living. And for many men, especially those who once held psychological power in your relationship, that contrast becomes almost unbearable. Here's something fundamental about human nature. We often don't truly value stability, loyalty, and deep connection until we're faced with its absence. So when a man realizes you're no longer emotionally tethered to him, when you've stopped looking back, stopped reaching out, stopped hoping, it shakes something foundational inside of him. When he first walked away, there was likely a sense of control, even superiority, whether he left because he thought the grass was greener, or simply because he couldn't face his own inadequacies. His decision brought temporary relief, freedom, but that freedom was often based on an illusion that you'd stay emotionally available, hurting but waiting, wounded but within reach. Your suffering provided a kind of reassurance that he still mattered, that he still had access, that the door was never truly closed. But when that door finally closes, quietly, with dignity, it changes everything. No dramatic displays, no angry messages, just peace. And that calmness, it becomes deafening to him. What makes it even more confronting is that your peace implies his presence wasn't essential to your happiness. Not only are you okay without him, but you're better, stronger, more centered, even joyful. For someone who derived part of their identity from being needed or desired by you, this becomes an existential wound. You see, many men, especially those who haven't done their own emotional work, often tie their worth to being irreplaceable in a woman's life. When you demonstrate that you can replace him with self-love, peace, purpose, community, or even the beautiful quiet of your own company, it doesn't just bruise the ego, it devastates it. You didn't have to scream, you didn't have to beg, you just grew. You turned inward, healed what he didn't even have the courage to face within himself, and you transformed. And now, when he sees you in that light, your smile brighter, your energy centered, he can't help but be haunted by the realization that while he stayed the same, you evolved. The psychological fallout begins. He starts to remember not just the physical connection or the conversations, but the essence of your presence. The way you forgave, the way you truly saw him despite his flaws. That kind of memory is dangerous for someone who never learned how to nurture what was sacred. Now you've become the symbol of what he couldn't hold on to. Ironically, you're at peace while he wrestles with regret. But there's more at play. Your peace doesn't just remind him of what he lost. It challenges his ego in the most fundamental way. Men are often raised, directly or indirectly, to see themselves as the center of a woman's emotional world. Society reinforces the idea that male presence is pivotal, that women orbit around their influence. So when you remove yourself from that orbit, when you no longer seek validation from him, it disrupts that deeply ingrained belief. It's not just uncomfortable, it's destabilizing for him. He might tell himself he doesn't care, that he's fine, but every time he hears your name spoken kindly, every time he sees a photo where you're glowing, every time mutual friends mention how well you're doing, something inside of him tenses. Because it contradicts the narrative he told himself that you needed him more than he needed you. that you wouldn't thrive without him, that maybe, just maybe, you'd always be lingering in the background of his life, an option, a backup plan. But you weren't a backup. You were the foundation. And now that the foundation has been rebuilt, by you and for you, his sense of superiority dissolves into something far more uncomfortable: insignificance. Here's the truth. He may never admit it, not to you and not even to himself. Your peace challenges him, not because it's wrong, but because it exposes him. When someone is still living in their own internal chaos, they expect others to mirror that turmoil. Misery loves company, after all. But you chose something different. You chose growth, authenticity, a sense of identity beyond the relationship. And that makes him feel small, not because you shamed him, but because you no longer need him. The absence of need isn't cold, it's clarifying. It says, I have become enough for myself. And for someone who once believed he was essential to your happiness, that realization is soul-shaking. Because deep down, he knows he never did the work to become the person who could stand beside a woman like the one you've become. And now it feels too late. Memory doesn't just replay moments, it reinterprets them through the lens of loss. When a man sees you've moved on completely and peacefully, he begins to romanticize the past. Not because it was perfect, but because compared to the emptiness he now feels, even ordinary moments from your time together take on an emotional weight he didn't recognize before. We all build narratives in our heads to make sense of our choices. He had one too. Maybe he told himself that you were too demanding, that you didn't understand him, that the relationship was stifling. Maybe he justified his distance or betrayals with a self-serving story, one where he was misunderstood and you were just a chapter in his journey towards something better. But when he sees you now, no longer waiting at the emotional doorway, something fractures in that narrative. He starts remembering things he pushed away, how you listened when no one else had the patience, how you showed up even when he didn't deserve it, how your presence made life feel fuller. And that memory becomes dangerous because it's no longer just a recollection, it becomes a source of longing and worse, profound regret. Not the fleeting kind, but the kind that lingers in quiet moments. When he sees photos of you smiling with people who now get the version of you he never took the time to appreciate, that smile is different. It's not seeking approval. It's not dimmed by insecurity, it's free. And that freedom reminds him of what he lost, and more hauntingly, what he will never get back. No matter how much he convinced himself that walking away was right, when he sees you living, not just surviving and doing it with quiet strength, every argument starts to look less like a problem with you and more like a limitation within himself. Every moment where you asked for emotional presence, which he once labeled as too much, now appears as an opportunity he squandered. The irony, you've already processed all this. You've lived it, mourned it, healed from it. You've gone through the fire and found your way to peace. But he's just arriving at the place you were months or years ago. He's starting the journey you've already completed. And that imbalance is crushing because he's not catching up to you. He's watching you disappear over the horizon while he's standing still, haunted by memories he can't rewrite. The pain of this realization is profound. It's not dramatic, it's quiet. It's the kind that settles in your chest and doesn't leave. Because now he sees your worth, not as a concept, but as a consequence, the consequence of neglect, of arrogance, of assuming you'd always be there. But the regret isn't even the deepest wound. There's something even more confronting that takes root when he sees how much you've grown. It's not just that he remembers the past, it's that your current self exposes how little he's changed. While you've done the inner work, faced the pain, built resilience from the rubble, he's likely still caught in the same patterns, running from the same truths. And that realization, the one where he sees your strength shining and realizes it came from the very pain he caused, hits like a wave he can't swim against. Because now, every success you embody, every ounce of confidence, every genuine smile, it all reflects back to him. But not in a flattering way. This mirror shows the truth, that while you turned your pain into wisdom, He remained distracted, superficial, complacent. What hurts most isn't that he lost you, it's that he lost access to a future with someone who was willing to believe in him even when he doubted himself. And now that you've stopped fighting for him and started fighting for yourself, he's left with the reality that he no longer inspires that kind of belief in anyone else. His only recourse is to watch from a distance, to see you celebrated, seen, loved, maybe even by someone who recognizes in you what he never slowed down enough to appreciate. And that's not just envy, it's grief. Grief for what was, what could have been, and most painfully, grief for the person he could have become had he just held on, had he just leaned in, had he just done the work. When a man realizes you've moved on, not just in words but in the quiet, immovable calm of your daily life, he often doesn't respond right away. He waits, he watches, he calculates, and then one day you get a message. A casual, "Hey stranger," or "I was just thinking about you." A voice note with a laugh that's supposed to disarm you. It's not random, it's not innocent, it's an attempt to reinsert himself into a space he used to occupy, to test whether his influence still exists. The logic is simple, but deeply flawed. If I can still get access to her, then I never truly lost her. And that illusion feeds the ego. It makes him feel less like he failed, and more like he simply stepped away from something unfinished. But what disorients him is when that door doesn't open, when your reply isn't eager, or when there is no reply at all, when the connection that once tied you to him emotionally is gone. This is where the real psychological shift happens. He's not only faced with your growth, but now he's forced to confront his irrelevance. You've removed the emotional invitation, you're not angry, you're not hurt, you're just done. And that kind of boundary isn't cold, it's clarity, it's hard-won, it's deeply earned. In the face of that, his usual tactics fall flat. The charm that once pulled you back now seems tired because you've evolved. You're not the same person he left behind. You've felt the fire, you've learned what peace costs. And you're not about to sacrifice it for a few crumbs of nostalgia. Confusion sets in for him. He wonders, why isn't this working? He thought you might still be carrying hope or hurt, something he could leverage. But instead he finds someone who no longer needs closure. Someone who gave herself the forgiveness he never offered. Someone who no longer lives in reaction to his decisions. And that disturbs the narrative he's carried, one where he could always come back, always have a place. But you're not welcoming chaos back in. You've rearranged your life in such a way that your emotional space is protected. Your energy isn't up for grabs anymore, and your heart is not a revolving door. It's a sanctuary now, one that only opens to those who earn it, fully, with consistency, with presence, with respect. And not everyone qualifies anymore, especially not those who once treated your love like it was disposable. That's what finally shatters his illusion, the belief that he could always return, that your love was unconditional no matter how many conditions he broke. Because now he sees that your silence isn't a game, it's your freedom, and he has no map to navigate it. What does a man do when the woman who once prioritized him no longer thinks about him? He might get angry. He might act confused. He might try to make you feel guilty. I thought we had something real. I still care about you. But those words are no longer currency because you realize that care without action is manipulation, and affection without consistency is just temporary comfort. He doesn't understand that love requires more than desire. It requires work, presence, vulnerability. And those are things he either didn't know how to offer or chose not to. And now, watching you thrive, watching you glow, watching you build a life where he's not even a shadow, that absence is not just noticeable to him, it's unbearable. But it doesn't end there, because your peace acts like a mirror. And what he sees in it is not flattering, because while you sit in your stillness, he's still spinning, still chasing, still performing, still in constant motion, because he hasn't learned to sit with himself. Your stillness, the deep earned kind that only comes after surviving something that could have broken you, is something he doesn't understand. And what we don't understand, we often fear or resent. Because your peace is not just calm, it's confrontation. It confronts him with everything he never faced, every emotional shortcut he took, every opportunity to grow that he passed up for ego or comfort. Your peace shows him that it was never about winning or losing. It was about growing, and while he mistook your silence for surrender, it was actually transformation. It was you choosing you, not because you stopped loving, but because you started loving yourself more. Now, every time he thinks about you, he doesn't see someone he can influence. He sees someone he can't reach. And that distance, that quiet confidence you now carry, that's the real loss. Because you didn't just walk away, you evolved. And evolution isn't something you can reverse. Once you see your own worth clearly, you can't unsee it. Once you taste peace, you refuse to settle for chaos. Once you realize that you are the home you were always searching for, you stop begging others to see your value. So he sits with that truth, that no matter how clever his approach, how casual his re-entry attempt, no matter how familiar his presence once was, it no longer matters, because he's not entering the same person's life. And the person you've become has no room for people who only show up to see if the door is still open. There is a kind of reverence that emerges when someone finally sees what you've become after they've lost you. It's the recognition of value they couldn't grasp when they had it, and the awareness that that value has now evolved beyond them. For a long time, your identity might have been wrapped in the roles you played. The supportive partner, the one who gave second chances not because they were earned, but because you believed in potential. You didn't just love him, you invested in him. And that generosity became expected, not cherished, not reciprocated, just assumed. But then you reached a point where self-sacrifice no longer felt like love. It felt like abandonment of yourself. And so you did what he never expected. You stepped back. You got quiet. You began rediscovering the person underneath all the emotional labor. And now he sees her, not the version he remembers, but the one he never took the time to know. The one who found her worth, not in what she could give, but in who she is. The one who set boundaries, not to punish, but to protect the peace she fought for. The one who no longer chases closure, but lives in wholeness. That image shakes him because it forces him to face a simple truth. You didn't become who you are because of him. You became who you are in spite of him. What happens next is human. He begins to mirror you. He starts referencing growth, balance, things he once dismissed when you brought them up. He's not mocking you. He's doing it because he sees that those things work, that they've made you magnetic, grounded. But here's the paradox. He wants the result without walking the path, without the tears, the reflection, the accountability. You earned this evolution. And when he tries to mimic the result without honoring the process, it doesn't work. And deep down, he knows it. The most powerful part, it's no longer about him at all. Your life isn't oriented around his presence or absence anymore. You're not healing so he'll notice. You're not glowing so he'll regret. You're simply living fully, authentically. That kind of self-possession is intimidating, not because you're trying to be, but because he has no framework to engage with someone who no longer defines themselves through proximity to another. You've become the kind of person who walks into a room and doesn't need to say a word because your presence already speaks volumes. You're no longer trying to be chosen, you choose. You decide who gets access, who earns your time, who matches your energy. And that shift from seeking to discerning means you're no longer operating from a place of lack. You're not filling voids, you're protecting your abundance. This shift is visible. People feel it when they talk to you. They sense the peace in your eyes, the clarity in your voice, the unapologetic joy that doesn't ask for permission. And for the person who once took your light for granted, this is both awe-inspiring and unbearable, because now you're no longer accessible in the way you once were. Emotionally, energetically, spiritually. You've elevated beyond the frequency of dysfunction. There's a kind of sacred finality in that. Not bitterness, but acceptance. You've made peace not just with what happened, but with what will never happen. And in doing so, you've closed a chapter with gratitude. Because even though it hurt, it also taught you, it refined you, it clarified your values, it gave you back to yourself. Now your love is no longer an offering to prove your worth, it's an expression of your worth. It's discerning, it's deliberate, and it's precious. And he sees that now, but it's too late. Because the version of you he sees today isn't one he can return to. She wasn't built for him, she was built after him. Sometimes the greatest gift a broken relationship can offer is the opportunity to become someone who never settles for anything less than what honors your soul. And that, more than any revenge, is the final truth. He doesn't just miss you, he misses the chance to grow alongside you. And that opportunity, it's gone. So what happens when someone sees you've moved on peacefully? They see everything they lost and everything you gained. But more importantly, you see everything you deserve. You see your strength. You feel your clarity and you own your peace. That, my friends, is your ultimate power.